Well, hello, and thank you for joining us today for what we believe is a very important discussion. So those of you who are here in person, we thank you. Those who are watching on the live stream, we'll also have a QR code, which is going to be up soon. If you want to send questions, they'll come to me through the iPad. So I lead the Milken Institute's Lifetime Financial Security Program. So I'm going to start with just a couple of quick background notes about the topic. I also work with Mairead Traynor, who's right here, and she's been integral to our research. We issued a comprehensive research report in the space, and that's available online. And it outlines the issues that are a little bit beyond the dialogue today, but retirement planning considerations are at the end. And what are the issues that impact individuals' ability to be financially secure throughout their lifetime? So we define lifetime financial security a little bit more broadly than traditional wellness definitions. Having the financial ability to pay recurring monthly expenses, we think is a key to being financially secure. Having the funds to pay for adequate housing is one of our other topics. The ability to absorb a financial shock, such as a car repair. Setting and meeting both short and long-term financial goals. Having a tax-advantaged savings account to save for the end of your work life or retirement. Being financially prepared to pay for medical costs, and then being able to live the life that you want, that's comfortable and that you can afford. So when I discuss this topic, particularly with the media and others, I often say that it applies to everyone. It applies to everyone in this room, everyone around the world. It cuts across all demographics, and it's the underpinning of how we live. We all want to be financially secure, and unfortunately, some of the stats that I'm going to cite, and most of you are going to be familiar with those, indicate that many people, in fact, are not financially secure for a variety of reasons. So we're going to get into some of those. I'll give you a few facts. We all know and we've heard that Americans, many are not living a financially secure life even before they're ready to retire. And some of those facts are daunting. At least 25% of Americans aren't saving for retirement at all. Close to 50% do not have access to an employee-sponsored plan. Further, as we've heard at several sessions throughout the conference, many Americans could not pay for an unexpected $400 expense. So if we let that sink in, that can be shocking for some. For others, it won't be a surprise at all. Many Americans are living paycheck to paycheck and often don't embrace finance or financial knowledge because they feel they can't save for the future. And I was saying to the panelists, I relate to that. I grew up at times without money when my parents were disabled, and you don't want to turn towards finance. You can't think about that when you're thinking about how am I going to pay the next bill. So what are we going to do to help people, and what's new, what's innovative, what's out there? And this is a panel of innovators, so I'm really encouraged by that. What's going on that could move the needle? That's the title of the session. So we're going to talk about things like driving financial engagement, whether there are behavioral blocks or things in people's mind that keep them from investing. The one that I often talk about is temporal bias, which is the inability to envision your future self. It's simply too far away for younger people. And we talk about the fact that we would like people to start investing by age 25. We all have heard about the power of compounding. Most of you finance people, you know that. And so that's a key point. People of color and women save less, and there are lots of reasons. We want to ensure that all Americans have the opportunity to live the American dream. And just briefly, the Milken Institute is finalizing construction of MCAD, the Milken Center for Advancing the American Dream. It'll be a gathering place in a museum-like setting, steps from the White House. So the mission is to advance social and economic mobility for all. And this is a topic that's a thread that runs through all of the Milken Institute's work. So what else can we do? That's what we're going to be talking about, that fundamental issue. And then lastly, a few points. Working longer is a topic that comes up, and I know Teresa will address that. For some people, they can't work longer because of age discrimination or the physical inability, so that's a challenge. I like this quote. When I was preparing, I was looking for a quote. Ben Franklin, an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. But is knowledge enough in this area? I think our panelists would say it's just a start. We need knowledge and we need action. So this topic is broad, and we're going to cover some parts of it. We can't go over everything, but it's a big topic. And so let's discuss what all of that can mean in a practical sense with our panel of experts. So what I wanted to do is just briefly say who's here, and you've seen it on the agenda, and let them give their 45-second, 1 minute of what they're doing. So next to me is Kahlil Byrd from Shur, CEO. Kahlil, tell us a little about what you do, just very briefly, and then we'll get into our dialogue after you all talk.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Milken for this opportunity, and Cheryl for preparing us so well. I have been a person who has focused on bipartisan policy making for 20 years of my career. But in 2019, I started to look more deeply at things that were affecting people directly. And the challenge that Americans are having in the middle class, creating and maintaining wealth, fascinated me, and it hasn't let me go since. Shur, the company that we launched, is a comprehensive financial services platform focused on professionals with student loans to help them move from debt to wealth. When we talk about that list that you just laid out, Cheryl, the challenge that individuals are having with their student loans, and these are people working for you, working hard every day, trying to bring value. The challenge that they're having is that between 21 and 40, they're losing their compounding time. I'm gonna land there because we're gonna talk more about it, but what we believe is that companies, in addition to the efforts of loan servicers and others, can open up a pathway to, we think, 45 million Americans to move from debt to wealth.
Thank you. And next to you is Teresa Ghilarducci, professor of the New School of Social Science. She's a well-known retirement researcher and expert. Teresa's vocal on many issues. So Teresa, just in a brief minute or so, tell us about what you do, and we'll get into it, of course.
I'm here because I've been studying this for about 35 to 40 years, which is about the time of our do-it-yourself retirement planning experiment in this country. That started when, in the Reagan era, Social Security cuts that have affected the baby boomer generation, the de-unionization that actually practically eliminated the defined benefit plan, and a rise of the hope of experts that working longer, torturing fourth graders with present value calculations in the form of financial literacy would somehow fill this gap. And we've lived under a sense, I think all of us, that if the individual just did something and had more education or their parents taught them, that this problem, that Cheryl, I really want to emphasize what you said in your intro, that most people are coming into retirement without having enough money to maintain their standard of living, or if you're middle class, a 40% chance you will be a near poor or poor elder. This is not sort of what we can do incrementally to fix a program that's gradually getting better. This is actually a crisis in society where things have gotten worse. And it's not because the individual doesn't know any better or hasn't gotten that financial literacy. All the evidence on financial literacy says that it barely moves the needle, as much as we would want to. All the evidence that people can just work another year or two and they could actually accumulate more and delay their Social Security credits, as much as I want that to be true, and the pathway to retirement security, it hasn't. So my research has been looking at the entire system with the assumption that it's the system and the design of the system that's broken, not the individuals within the system.
Thanks, Teresa. And then next is Alex Rodriguez, founder and CEO of A-Rod Corp. And of course, we all know Alex from Major League Baseball, World Series champion in the New York Yankees, and you're doing a lot in the space, so thanks for joining us. And Alex, give us just briefly what you're doing, and we'll get into that during the dialogue.
Yeah, thank you. Just like both of you, just from a different lens, I was born in the mid-'70s in New York, two immigrant parents from Dominican Republic, and growing up, I had two passions, baseball and business. And what I realized is that, the way out of the rough neighborhood is through education. And one of the things that I wanted to do very, very early on is I watched my mother, when my dad left at the age of 10, take on two jobs. She was a secretary in the morning, served tables at night. I would help counter tips when she would get home. And it was incredibly inspiring for me. And at the age of 12, we were at Publix. Publix is a supermarket chain in Miami. And I saw her, the bill was like $75. She pulled out her tip money, which was about $55. And then she went into another pocket in her purse and got what I call some funny money.
Yeah.
And what that was government money. And I saw my mom and the shame she had on her face. It was at that point that I knew that I had to just do something really special and become the alpha of my family. And the only way to do that is through education. So one of the things I've done over the last 20 years is we put over 50 kids, just like me, first-generation immigrants, through the University of Miami and FIU. And today, when you look at the athletes world, and entertainers so many stories of rags to riches, back to rags.
Yep.
And it's something that we must stop. And the problem is not to make more money, but it's really to understand what to do with money, how money works, how capital markets work. And today I've probably mentored well over 100 athletes and entertainers, just like Magic Johnson, who speaks nearby today, the way he's mentored me over the last 30 years.
Thank you, Alex. And next to you is Adam Roseman, founder of SteadyIQ. And tell us just really briefly about what your company does. It's very interesting as well.
Sure, I appreciate it. Today we support about 7 million non-standard workers. Those who are hourly and 1099 workers gain easier access to a financial safety net by utilizing a collaborative data set of financial transactional data.
Thank you. And then on the end, we have Gerri Walsh, president of the FINRA Investor Education Foundation, also SVP of FINRA. And we worked together many years ago. We're at the SEC. But tell us about the foundation and a bit about what you're doing, and then we'll get into our dialogue.
Sure. Well, for those of you who don't know, FINRA is the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. We oversee one slice of the securities industry, the broker-dealers and individual reps who sell stocks, bonds, other types of securities and investments to the American public. And the foundation is a wholly owned subsidiary. Our whole mission is to help people build wealth, particularly from low to moderate income families, and also to protect that wealth from financial fraud and from scams. And like Alex, I'm the daughter of immigrants. My sister and I were among the first in our family to go to college, and I was the only to go to grad school. And I went to grad school, I was born a little earlier than Alex. I went to grad school at a time where loans were 12% and 9%. Does anyone remember those days?
Yeah.
So I made some financial mistakes, but I lived like a church mouse and paid off those loans within 5 years. And I wanted to make sure that nobody ever made the same mistakes that I did and that we could build financial capability for all people.
Thank you. So let's get into the discussion with our esteemed panelists. We're going to talk about the significant issues that Americans are facing. I want to talk a little about big picture issues, and then if you want, touch upon the lens of your own experience. And so what are the big picture issues, and what are some of your experiences that you might want to share that relate to this? For example, I know that Adam, you've talked about millions of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. So why don't we start there? And I know Alex has some anecdotes, and so do others. So.
Sounds good. I appreciate it, Cheryl. So in today's America, roughly 2/3 of American workers and households don't have a predictable income. They work 1099 jobs. They work hourly jobs. They might know what their hourly wage is if they're hourly workers, but they don't have a sense of how many hours they're going to get every week or every month. There's 1099 workers, gig workers, who have contract work. Their utilization rates significantly vary. This environment in particular, when you have an unpredictable income, makes it very difficult for you to gain access to what's critical to be able to provide a baseline for financial health, which is a financial safety net. Okay. 3 types of core safety nets that Americans use. One is savings, and in today's America, a lot of statistics around the fact that upwards of 2/3 of the American population doesn't have $500 in emergency savings that they can tap. The second is access to affordable credit, and because of a lack of data availability for the majority of this population, they can't gain access to affordable credit. The only credit that they have access to is predatory credit, which can likely dig them into a further financial hole that's very difficult for them to ever dig out of. The third is access to safety net benefits, public benefits. And today, only roughly 20% of individuals who apply for public benefits have their income easily verified. The other 80% have to provide manual documentation, wait for caseworker review that can last weeks or months. Across the population that we've worked with, we provide a financial foundation for a number of individuals, millions of individuals who have had access to public benefits, and also a foundation for almost every basic income pilot that's happened in America. What we've seen consistently is absent a safety net, an adequate safety net, it's very difficult to ever be able to get yourself into an adequate financial state. What happens when you apply for public benefits? To the extent that what we've seen, if you receive your benefits quickly, if you're a full-time W-2 worker who has financial shock and applies for benefits, you get your benefits within a week. To the extent that you're a non-standard worker, those who I talked about, which make up the majority of the population, you can wait weeks or even months, receive the wrong benefits decision. What happens in the meantime? You turn to that predatory credit. Yeah. You did yourself a further financial hole. Very difficult to ever work your way out. So from the standpoint of building financial health for all, the concept of this panel today, unless we tackle those two issues, predictable income, access to financial safety net, very difficult for the majority of American workers to be able to ever achieve that.
Yeah, thank you. And I sort of framed this with two parts that are somewhat related, which are sort of big picture issues and then your own experience. And Alex, I know you tell your mother's story and sort of how that impacted you and your choices and investing and saving at a really young age. So it's quite amazing. So we'd love to hear a little about that.
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl. So, I mean, look, at the end of the day, for me, it's not like I had great role models. So I had to kind of think outside the box. One of the things I did very early on in my teenage years is that I read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And what that book taught me was the ability to be reactive, proactive versus reactive. You know, my parents and grandparents taught me you get a job, you get W-2 money, you pay taxes, and usually you don't have any money left. But if you do, you buy a car, you buy a Rolex, or you buy a liability. You know, what I learned in Rich Dad, Poor Dad is that by being proactive, there's no way to get financial freedom unless you invest. And it's very hard to have financial freedom with W-2 income where the government is your, you know, in some cases over 50% partner, right? So it always chases you down. So the way to financial freedom is you make money, you pay taxes, and you save, and you get excited about investing. Now the thing is you have to pick the right jockey and be able to invest with that jockey. Like I have a great partner here in Darren. Darren, raise your hand. He's my partner with the Timberwolves. And you got to find great people. And because I'm an athlete, intelligence is obviously not my competitive advantage. But I am a baseball player, and a lot of people like to talk about baseball. And we trade stories, we trade times, and Darren has assets, I have assets, and together 1 + 1 = 3. So Rich Dad, Poor Dad literally changed my life, and we have to educate our young generation. And the fact that we don't teach enough or even more financial literacy in high school and junior high is really a catastrophe.
Yeah, and we're going to get into a little bit of financial education, which is a key point. KB, you personally talk about when you were founding Shur that you had to balance student loan debts yourself, as did I. Just paid mine off in my 50s, which was fairly shocking. But kids are coming out of school with, kids to me, young people with, you know, much higher amounts. And our research report showed the astronomical cost and laid that out. But you also help people who are not just the younger people, but people in their 40s who took on debt. And you know, tell us a little about your experience in the starting of Shur and what you're doing.
So on a personal level, you know, my wife and I have lived a life of commitment. She's a CEO of a national nonprofit. I've worked in bipartisan policy for a really long time, trying to make really solid change. But there was never a time in our lives where we weren't balancing the repayment of our student loans on one hand and then incremental steps that we could make to create wealth for ourselves and our families. And it's challenging for, we think, 30 million people who are doing the right things, who made an investment in themselves, but are not seeing any progress in what they're doing. So on a national level, this conversation has become binary. Are we going to forgive every dollar of student loan debt? And is that going to be a benefit that we'll see now and in the future or not? Unfortunately, that doesn't really catch the nuance of what's actually happening. So what happens to a person as they get older, when they're 25, the point at which you think they should start investing, and I think that's true, essentially they'll talk about their student loan debt all day long. They're sort of fresh out of school, they're on their first jobs, and et cetera. But as they get to be 30, 35, and 40, they're quiet about it. There's one level of service that their friends who are able to write a check to a financial advisory firm get in terms of trust and estates planning, planning to get your real estate, your investment portfolio, securing your dollars for your family. What we find with 30 million student loan borrowers in the country who are all doing the right things is that there's no company or financial advisory or financial services firm that's focusing on them, that's appreciating the fact that they made this early investment in themselves, and that is an indicator when they graduated, when they're showing up for work every day, and et cetera. So at Shur, we wanted to do this not anecdotally, but we dug into the data with Equifax. We've done the largest continual data study of professionals with student loans that has been done, which surprised me. Student loans are binary. If you're paying them, great, maybe I'll market to you as a financial services company. If you're not, I don't have to think about you. We actually want to be able to make that link between the choices that people made early in investing in themselves, their successful repayment journey that they're taking, the success they're having in their career, and use that as criteria to pre-qualify them for the escalator that brings them up. And I think everybody on the panel would say, in the US context, that's buying a home or starting a business. And I think the other part of it is being prepared for your retirement. So we're making the link between the earliest decisions that you make entering the workforce to how you are thinking about retiring and living the latter part of your life.
I'm going to skip ahead a little on some of the things we're going to talk about because it came up in a way. The notion of shame, we talked about that as a group. Not shaming people is a key point as well. When we talk about this, there are people who feel like they can't save at all. So they're thinking, this doesn't apply to me, or those who don't even have access to an employee retirement plan. What do they do? So let's sort of touch upon that. Some people aren't earning enough, as I said, feeling like they can save for the future. And a number of you have talked with me about that, et cetera. Teresa, you've spoken on that, so I'll go to you first, of those who really are at the bottom of the income spectrum, maybe.
I really appreciate all the work that you're doing to help certain subgroups, but the literature shows that the way that Americans acquire wealth for, let's say, their retirement security, but also to maintain their communities and their families, are through institutions. So it wasn't so do-it-yourself, it was more automatic. Even W-2 workers, people who were low paid, actually put pennies towards their defined benefit plan or their employer structured plan, or they bought a house but they didn't have home equity loans, or they went to the really good public school down the block like I did at Berkeley, a world-class institution for practically free. So over the past 40 years, going to a good institution required, what, $60,000 a year? That is a public policy decision, not the fault of the individual. Not having a job that helps you save for retirement is the fault of the system, not the individual. But when you have I'm answering your question, a do-it-yourself system over 40 years, the flip side of that is the blame the victim system. So we have now millions of people approaching retirement savings ashamed, putting down their head, saying, I wish I would have done X, when it really wasn't their fault at all. I just want to emphasize that what we have to do is have a bold, systemic change in the way people keep their wealth and acquire their wealth.
Yeah, interesting point. I don't know if anyone wants to just jump in on that point. Otherwise, I have some more.
I'm happy to. The FINRA Foundation has done research in the context of fraud on the impact of shame for people not coming forward. It is so easy now to be a fraudster and to take people's money. And, people don't come forward, they don't report because they do feel that sense of shame. They also don't necessarily know where to go forward. But one of the things that we do, the media, financial institutions, friends and family, we shame people. We blame people for the problems that they have. And the way we talk about the people who have lost money, The way we talk about people who are struggling financially, the way we blame them for the circumstances that they're in contributes to an endless cycle. And so I really think we need to change the frame of how we're talking about opportunity and how people, not beyond the fraud context, how people, through circumstances that are often not their own fault, are facing a struggle. How can we help them and give them a hand up?
Yeah, and that leads to another point that's related, but I did want to just add that I was at the CEO panel with Thasunda Brown-Duckett and the CEO of Nationwide and Transamerica and Edward Jones yesterday, and Thasunda mentioned that idea of money can cause people to feel ashamed, right, when they have those discussions, or people uncomfortable having those discussions. So it's an important point. The other thing we wanted to talk a little about is meeting people where they are, literally and metaphorically. So some of you are doing outreach to groups, to individuals, to churches. KB, you've talked about meeting people sort of in the workplace where they are. So I'd like to start with KB and then have Gerri add some things, and Alex as well.
So I'm going to tie this together with the previous conversation around shame. So during the pandemic, we had a very interesting reprieve of individuals who didn't have to pay their student loans. And millions of Americans made a bunch of good decisions during that time period. They saved more, they paid down their debt, their credit scores went up, and et cetera. In your companies, you have individuals who did not have a student loan liability in the summer and now are balancing $1,000 or $2,000 of their family dollars going to repayment. The last thing that individual in your company is going to do, somebody trying to prove themselves, is come to their supervisor and say, I am under financial pressure. The largest group, or the group where student loan balances are growing the most, are not young, irresponsible Gen Zers. It's actually Gen X.
Exactly.
These people spent their entire adult lives paying off their student loans. They got into their 40s. Their kids started going to school. In the United States, you will do anything to get your kids in and through school. They're making a modest but middle-class salary in your locations, and they're piling on debt right now to get their kids through school. This particular situation is an opportunity, in my opinion. It's an opportunity where, for loan servicers and other organizations that are responsible for the system, they don't actually have the share of voice. They don't have the ability to connect to your employees the way you do. So what we are encouraging is a national conversation led by companies to bring your employees out of the dark and into the light, to be able to talk about this with you, their bosses, to be able to talk about this with their contemporaries, to learn strategies and lessons on how to successfully come back into repayment, which millions of people are doing. But the key to it is not letting people be quiet for years and years as they try to figure out how to wrestle these problems, and many times alone.
And I was talking about meeting people where they are. I'm going to actually go to Alex and then Gerri. I know, Alex, you do outreach, community outreach, speak to people. We've also talked about the fact that you're feeling like people don't even have the base knowledge. You equated this to playing chess, and some people don't know how to play that. So tell us, give us your thoughts on that.
We talked about that on our call.
Yeah.
But, I mean, just to expand a little bit on what you said, which I think is very smart, I think if we zoom out 50,000 feet, the barrier of entry starts even earlier. I always have a case study of one. That's my mom, right? And I look at it from that prism. Because that's, I think, what we have to kind of, that's where the empathy and compassion has to come from, right? Mm-hmm. And when you look at all these acronyms, business is just like baseball, where you say, BA, RBI, ERA. Why not say batting average, runs batted in, earned run average, right? Business has a bunch of these acronyms. So if someone like my mother tries to get in the huddle and she hears all these acronyms, she's going to run the other way. So we have to start inviting people, even with the way we communicate about business. That's number one. Number two, I always think about, anybody in the room has ever played chess or liked chess by a show of hands? Well, I love chess. And my uncle Fernando, at the age of 9, taught me how to play chess, and I fell in love with the game. And it's a bit of a thinking person's game. And all my buddies back home, all my homies, they all play checkers. And I love nothing more than to teach them and then beat them up, beat them up, beat them up. And when you look at life, it's a really big chess game. If you don't know how to play and you don't know the rules, you have an incredible competitive disadvantage. So we gotta teach the next generation of people the rules of business and how capital markets work.
Thank you. And Gerri, FINRA is doing a lot of things where they're physically meeting people where they are as well. And Alex does that outreach too, meeting with people and others. But you have events, at churches and other things. You partner with other organizations. So tell us a bit about what you're doing, and then we'll get into sort of a slightly different topic.
Absolutely. We know that we can't boil the ocean, so we try to make good cups of tea wherever we are, and we do that by listening to the communities, because the community is going to guide you in terms of helping you realize what it is they need and what would be effective for those communities. So we've been working with local AARPs on fraud prevention strategies, with BBBs. We've also been working with the Girl Scouts, with local councils on economic education to enhance the financial education that they're doing in their communities, to help young girls learn about investing, learn about money. We've all bought Girl Scout cookies, but how do they invest that money, right? We've also been working with local charities who create these really interesting partnerships. KB was referring to the role of employers. The last thing most people want to do is go to their supervisor and say that they're suffering a financial hardship. But what if an employer could be the place where financial wellness thrives? And increasingly, employers, large and small across the nation, are doing just that to try to connect people with the resources that they need. And we've been engaging in an experiment with low to moderate income individuals, people who don't have student loans because they didn't go to college, wage workers, but their employers are starting to offer employer-sponsored small dollar loans in partnership with local credit unions that allow the worker, through their paycheck, to repay a loan that helps them weather a financial storm, and then builds in a behavioral element of creating a savings account once they've repaid that loan. And we've seen that that kind of initiative at the community level, providing support through the local nonprofits that focus on financial wellness at the workplace, but not asking your supervisor, going through the payroll folks, can really be a step up, and it has led to people paying off their debt and buying homes.
Yeah, go ahead, Adam. I was going to ask you something anyways. Adam, you have the income passport. I don't know if that fits in here, but that's an innovative thing that you're doing that's helping people. Yeah,
a little bit. I appreciate that. So I'm going to talk about meeting people where they are from a data perspective, okay?
Yeah.
So if you look at the insurance system in the US, if you look at the financial system, if you look at the benefits infrastructure, it's built on two things. One is credit score. The second is a pay stub, okay? Those are both archaic. From the standpoint of the US ecosystem today, we no longer have a unbanked crisis, we have an underbanked crisis. You look today at how people bank, Cash App has more users who utilize Cash App for receipt of income than does Chase Bank, okay? Cash App is not something that's generally accepted. They don't offer traditional forms of credit. Difficult to be able to provide access to your Cash App data. To the extent that you don't have a focus on where people are today, which is they're earning their money, they're not receiving a pay stub, they're receiving it into their Cash App account, their Venmo account, their PayPal account. If you're not able to get access to insurance, if you're not able to get access to credit, if you're not able to get access to benefits, as a result of that one particular item, there's a big problem.
Yeah, Teresa, I know you had to add something.
On that point, we have a wonderful system in place to help people with their financial security, and I don't want to lose track of that. It really solves all the problems here. It's called Social Security. Because a W-2 worker, a gig worker, a 1099 worker, all workers without any pamphlets in 4th grade on financial literacy, without knowing all those acronyms, they pay into a system that provides them social insurance. And all the research that I've done, shows that most people want wealth as a backstop, as a cushion. Well, that's just another word for insurance. And so if we had a system where all the people that have left behind, remember it's 51% of all workers, no matter what form of work they take, do not have access to a sensible way to save for retirement, whether they're 25, whether they're 40, whether they're low income or high income. If we built a system on top of Social Security where people would automatically save for their retirement without having to go through Perspectives or the Wall Street Journal, and that system is being proposed. It's called the Retirement Security for All Americans Act. It's bipartisan. You can believe in bipartisanship, but you can just practically know you won't get anything done if just the Democrats or the Republicans are for it. This plan is amazing. It would cover everybody who doesn't have a retirement plan at work. That's about 73 to 80 million people. That's scale. That means something. And if you work below the median, which is by definition half of the workforce, you not only would put automatically 3%, but the government would match 5%. And all the research has shown that the sense of hopelessness or non-affordability really is diminished when somebody else is helping you out to save. And so even though you could take that 3% out under the plan, you probably won't because it's matched by the government. It's also in instruments that you can trust, and you don't have to do all that kind of financial literacy to know that the system that federal government workers now save, the Thrift Savings Plan, would also be available for you. So if it's good enough for senators, it should be good enough for the person who drives my Uber to the airport.
I have my money left in the
As
TSP
a Thrift
plan.
Savings Plan. It's one of the most popular plans among all workers. And I'm really hopeful that this plan can pass Congress. It's bipartisan, and also if the politician had ears to hear, they would see that every single survey about what people want from their government tells them, whether they're left wing, right wing, or up wing, that they want the government to help them provide some financial security. They don't want a cut in Social Security retirement age. They don't want to have to work longer because most people are involuntarily retired. Most people retire a lot sooner than they plan to. And most people actually want an individual account that they can call their own. So the financial literacy and the subgroup help that you do is really necessary in this broken system. But I just want to fix the system. And the RSAA, sponsored by, this is an ad, John Hickenlooper, a Democrat, and Tom Tillis, a very conservative Republican for North Carolina, have sponsored that together, and they need all of our support to get it passed.
Thank you. It brings up 2 points.
Thank you.
Social Security, we've written about it and spoken about the notion that we don't want people living on Social Security. I turned on CBS News about a year ago, and I saw it featuring a woman in her 80s who was trying to go back to work. The average person, I think, is not recognizing and looking early to see how little their benefits may be. And so that was never meant to be, as those of us who are in the space know, the primary source of income in retirement. It was to be a pension, three-legged stool, Social Security, and then your own saving. Now people are left to save alone. One thing that we also like, I'll just say, is lifetime income products. That's a number of firms are coming together, TIA, Nationwide Financial, and others, to develop those products which will give people guaranteed income within our system. So that's another change. And thinking about sort of change, I know, KB, you work with Equifax, and you've been thinking about that sort of notion of how you can connect there and the balancing part, if you want to touch upon that briefly.
Yeah, thank you. Why is this a financial opportunity? Why is this a financial opportunity for corporations, the financial services industry? What we believe fundamentally is that because 30 million people in the United States who are doing the right things, they're paying their bills, they have decent credit, but they have negative net worth, high debt loads, and other things, these individuals and their families are undercultivated by corporations. So we did the data work with Equifax to understand the field of battle, but our biggest partner, and I'll give them a plug, is Edward Jones. So Penny Pennington, a guy named David Clooney, and David Stifler, who both run a program on her behalf. Edward Jones is trying to make the connection between the impact dollars that they can spend in a community, in this case St. Louis, and the ability to increase their reach toward customers. They want to give their financial advisors more tools to be able to bring people in earlier or cultivate them longer. Our place at the table is to say, we want you to begin to have an understanding of the journey that people are taking, going from their student loan debt and the bet that they made on themselves toward wealth creation. And we want you to be a part of that conversation with people earlier than you would normally meet them. Our argument is that if you want to cultivate younger people, young being defined as 21 to 40, and if you're not talking about student loans, you're not really talking about them. Because as they get to be 30, they're having a baby, or they're thinking about childcare, or they're thinking about whether or not they're going to buy a home and other things. So you've got to be in that conversation with them earlier than you would normally be there in order to build trust so that they can be a long-term customer. Our success has been that we have done the data analysis in St. Louis to understand the borrower community there. And we see big differences between, in a community in St. Louis, 300,000 people have either had or have student loans. And there's a gigantic difference between the credit scores of people whose student loans have been paid off versus people who are still wrestling through that. These are things that can be solved by a lot of the things that have been talked about here, but we think that companies can be thinking about this group of people that we're putting a big green circle around as a huge economic opportunity if you increase the lifetime value of each borrower in the country and you deliver them financial services earlier and more richly than you are now.
And thinking about that, absent the government making big changes or policy changes, which aren't going to necessarily happen tomorrow, but we're encouraged by a lot of the things we're hearing and the engagement, and also financial services firms stepping up in the space to create products. But there's also the notion of getting people to engage with finance, early engagement. Alex, I love your story because you're an example of someone who engaged with finance way before you had made a significant amount of money in Major League Baseball. And it was surprising to me to hear when I'd met you last year that you were investing at a young age. And tell us a little about that experience. And then you also engage with people on the flip side who have made a lot of money and lost money, right? So that engagement piece is important as well.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm a byproduct of my environment. I remember when I was around 12 or 13, and we were expert at one thing, is paying rent every, first of every month. And I kind of felt, heartbroken for my mother because I felt that every 30 days, it felt like it was every 3 days.
Yeah.
And I saw the pressure on her, and I saw her swollen feet, and I would count her tip money. And I remember going down on my knees as a 13-year-old and praying to God, saying, boy, if I ever get to trade places with the landlord, I will. And about a decade later, I was fortunate enough to have a few crumbs, and I bought a $250,000 duplex. And that duplex worked out well. I sold it for double, then bought a fourplex and an eightplex. And over the last 20 years, we've acquired about $5 billion of assets. And it started really, really small. I think this whole idea in this kind of TikTok era, everything is like there's no delayed gratification. And the point is, if you play the long game versus the image versus reputation, or versus buying a car or investing into Tesla or whatever, Ford or whatever, usually the non-sexy one is the better for the long term,
exactly.
right? But I was asking Cheryl and I were talking back, and there's a question I get asked the most often: how do players make so much money and go bankrupt? You've probably wondered that yourself, right? All right, so what's your name, young lady? Marie? Perfect. What's your man, sir? Steve. All right, Steve. So Steve plays for the Dodgers or the Yankees, right? He makes $100 million. Okay, Steve says the Dodgers. Okay, Dodger blue. I saw Todd Bowley running around here. So Steve made $100 million. He lives in California. So now he's down to $45 million, okay? Steve has an agent. He takes 10%. Big Steve's down to $35 million. He also has a manager. He pays him 5%.
Yeah.
He's down to 30. Now, Steve hasn't bought a house yet, hasn't bought a car yet, and Steve hasn't even filed for his first divorce.
Yeah.
So it happens quickly.
Yeah.
And a lot of athletes, use that for joking, but a lot of this is true. In my DMs and my social media, I have athletes that I played with 20 years ago, 15 years ago, that have made $50, $100, $150 million, and call me and say, Alex, can you lend me $7,200? If you don't lend me this, I'm going to foreclose on my house. I'm going to foreclose on my car. And you're just going like, how is this possible?
Yeah.
They need people like Darren in their life, people like Steve, and other people to help them, coach them, and align with the right people. So.
Yeah, as a key point, in FINRA, one of your mantra, or maybe just a quote that you use is building a financially capable of America through education and research, right? So that's your sort of overarching mission. And so tell us a little about some of the things you're doing in that space, which is outreach and some of the information you're giving people and getting them to engage early and maybe try to change some mindset while we recognize that we still have people who are going to be underserved.
We're doubling down on financial inclusion, and we're working hard to make sure that the financial markets are accessible for all. And while our space is investing, we mean that more broadly with respect to student loans and credit and emergency funds and the like. So we're really thinking about new ways to reach investors, particularly younger investors. We've done a fair amount of research to better understand investor behavior. And the face of investing has changed. Investors are much younger. They are much more diverse. They have lower income. And they are excited to enter a market that allows them to participate with lower barriers to entry. It used to be that you had to have thousands of dollars in order to open a brokerage or an advisory account. That's no longer true. And the ability of technology, through apps, through online systems, to make investing effectively frictionless has really enticed a new generation, a new kind of group of investors. And we have to meet them where they are. I mean, within their community, but also, Alex mentioned TikTok, right? We have to be on social media, and I'm not sure we'll be on TikTok, but we are definitely doubling down on new ways to reach investors. We know that we're a regulator, and we're a little bit like the broccoli. People want the chocolate. But we're trying to create some chocolate-covered broccoli so that people are interested in actually getting information from us from unbiased sources. Fundamentally, money is emotional. And when people make emotional decisions when they're investing, especially through gamification can be used for good, but let's face it, gamification can be used to have people make decisions that are suboptimal for them. So how can we slow down the decision making? How can we cause people to step back and think, is this right for me? Is it right for my goals? Fundamentally, through inclusive outreach, by engaging partners that we haven't traditionally engaged to try to leverage the value of the dollars we invest in building a capable investing population, that's the way we're going.
Thank you. And we have a lot of topics. So I'm going to skip to the final stage and then ask you some things about individual advice you might give to individuals. And the final stage when we think about savings is retirement. And some people are going to referring to their work transition period. Many people are probably not going to retire in the traditional sense. They may work part-time, but really the same issues apply. And so as I cited those statistics at the beginning, they're fairly daunting regarding the low dollar number and the percentage of people saving and the access. So we have a lot of issues here. And so we want to just sort of consider briefly here, and then a couple of other quick topics of what are the issues that arise when we consider retirement saving. And I know, Teresa, this is your area of expertise, but I wanted Adam just to start out by highlighting why you started Steady, because it was really related to thinking about your own situation with your family and retirement and your father, right?
Yeah, it was. So my father moved to Savannah, Georgia from Sacramento, California during what would have been his retirement years, but didn't have adequate savings and so needed to go find work. He started looking at hourly work, and he had the challenge that I talked about. He had no idea how many hours he was going to get, so couldn't generate a predictable income. Same thing when he started looking at 1099 work. I went down the decade ago, the young, obnoxious entrepreneur that I was, and I said, Dad, I'm going to fix this for you, right? I couldn't fix it. I couldn't figure out a solution. And so I realized very quickly that there was a problem. The second personal story is, and as a result of that, he's in a position where he's getting by, but because of the challenges he faced during his life as an hourly worker and as a contract worker, very difficult to ever be able to be in a position to save for retirement. 2 years ago, my now 14-year-old son became catastrophically ill. I spent 5 months in the ICU with him. There were countless families that I interacted with around. I had the benefit to be in a position, because I had a safety net, of being there with him, getting him access to the best care at that time and thereafter, because that safety net was in place. All the other families that were in the hospital environments in 3 states where he was treated had to go to work during the day, leave their child behind. If they didn't, they had to miss rent. They had to cut back on a meal. They had to miss other critical payments, and they were faced with these tremendously difficult decisions. And this is a concept of financial shock, and one, again, that I'll point back to: without that adequate safety net in place, you're never going to be in a position where you're able to put funds away. You're always going to end up in a negative environment.
Yes, and skipping to the, I want to say, maybe the worst case scenario when we think about retirement, and Teresa and I were just discussing that, which is, and I was asked this question when I interviewed for the job, and there was no exact answer. Rich DeTizio asked me, what about those who are close to retirement age or in retirement who haven't saved enough? How do we help them? And Teresa, you talked about the need for longer working lives, which is something that comes up. The answer is often you need to work longer. I work with other experts, they're saying that, but then we know that age discrimination prevents that. Some people can't do that. And you have that quote that I like so much, Teresa, about making older people into the new young people. So I wanted to just hear your thoughts on that notion of those people that need the most help, frankly, right? And how should we think about that?
So did you hear what Cheryl just asked me?
Yeah.
She asked me the impossible, because I have these conversations sometimes with 400, 500 people, and they're all 40 and they're 50, and they're staring at me with big wide eyes when they find out that they really should have $400,000 by the time they're 65, and really hang on to a job until they're 65, when they know that, especially for women, you get pushed out way before 65. So you're asking me to stand in front of people that are wide-eyed, been really failed by the system, what to do. And so I pull up my socks and I say, first of all, it's not your fault. Because if you have shame, you actually have innervation and you lack will and power. The first thing you do is you pull your lever on consumption. You really interrogate what you need, and you try to cut back on consumption. Oh, that really goes over well. That goes over well as a broccoli salad. So then I pull up my socks and say, know what your risks are as you grow older, and it's your health risks. So do what you can to avoid diabetes. That goes over as well as save more. Right. Okay, and then I say, gird your loins for the predators that are coming after you. That helps a little bit. They get a little bit angry, and that brings up the energy in the room. Because we have this wacky system where you do everything right, and then you reach about 65 and 70, and the system pins about tens of thousands of dollars on your lapel and sends you on the bus and say, now be careful now, right in the stages of cognitive decline. And the other thing I say, and I'll end now, is, okay, you've tried to keep your health up, you tried to save more. When you're 50, you have to save, and you have nothing. Let's say you just got a divorce. You have to save 50% of your paycheck. Well, some people can do it. At least they can do 40%. But the other thing I say is that pull your lever as a voter and make sure you investigate what that politician wants to do with your Social Security and Medicare, because those two programs alone for a person approaching retirement is worth about $500,000. So it's really hard to tell people after they've suffered through this broken system what to do on their own. But there are things you can do on your own while you're waiting for Congress.
And we only have about 5 minutes, but one thing we didn't ask that I would be remiss if I didn't ask Alex, which was lessons you've learned from Major League Baseball that apply to finance and giving people advice. It's a kind of an interesting point.
We only have 5 minutes, so I'd like to defer that, but I want to double down on what you said, which I think of all the things you said, the single most important thing to remember is what you said, which is even if you know all of this and you have all the data and you have all of it, finances and money is highly, highly emotional. And even if you have the data, and even if you know what to do, it's just like baseball. You're sitting at Yankee Stadium, 63,000 people screaming at you, 3-2 count, Pedro Martinez on the mound. Emotions is the enemy of success. Emotion is the enemy of the zone. When the stock goes down, we feel depressed. When the stock goes up, we feel giddy. The stock doesn't care about us. So how do we teach, and this is maybe for all of us to go away and think about this, how do we teach detachment from emotions to investing? And that is the magic mark. There's a lot of people walking around that have made $1 gazillion, and they've mastered this. There's no better one in the world than Warren Buffett, right? But the more you can detach, I mean, you can be emotional with your relationships, your daughters, your kids, your wife, your husband, all of that. But with capital, you have to be able to be a little bit of a sociopath and not care that much. Because the more you care about hitting a ball, the more it goes away from you. The more you care about making money, the more it runs away from you. So it's kind of you have to stay in the pocket. And that's, I think, the secret formula. Great point.
And I was just going to end with a quick sort of lightning round question, which is each of you get like 40 seconds now, but we don't have to end precisely on time. No one's going to throw us out of the room. But it really just each of you highlight, and you've highlighted a great number of things and a lot of food for thought. One or two things that you're focused on, thinking about, that you think will move the needle. That's the title of the session in financial security. So we'll just go down the line and start with KB.
Alex has done a great service for us, a bit in his career, but also in showing us how easy it is to go from financial capability to peril. It used to be that having $350,000 or $250,000 for a family would work out for you. Chop it the same way Alex did, put some child care in there, put responsibilities around housing, and then have an emergency happen with your parents, and everything can be inside out.
Yep.
The other thing that happens with people of color, women, first-gen individuals who went to college, is that their paycheck is the family paycheck. Their income is an income not just for them, but for others. For me and what we're trying to do at Shur, in terms of professionals with student loans, as an individual, don't avoid your student loan. Take care of it, get into it, learn to love it. It doesn't love you, but appreciate what you tried to do in terms of moving yourself forward. For a company, create a space for people to be able to talk and relay their concerns, feelings about their financial situation relative to their student loans. There are 45 million people coming back into repayment right now. Many of those individuals have their own kids going to college. Open up that space for conversation for those individuals. And from policymakers, what we have decided as a country is that we're not going to let, and this is the Biden administration, we're not going to let your student loan payment bump up against your Social Security check.
Yeah.
We're going to try to give you a breather in your 40s or maybe early 50s to be able to build that wealth for retirement. I think this can be a smart package for people being more successful.
Thanks. And Teresa, I don't know if you have one or two points. I know you want your policy change. Yeah.
That's right. I think it's my moral obligation as an expert. I have a great job as a professor to focus issues on big systemic problems. And it's hard, and I don't have any power except what I know. And I know that without a bold plan, we call it the Gray New Deal, like the Retirement Security Act for All Americans, should I say it 5 more times?
We've got it, I think.
That we won't actually do anything bold for the 83 million people who know everything we just know here. They know they have to save early. They know they have to put more in. They know they have to avoid predators. But they need a system like Social Security that's automatic, where they can start really being involved in the system that lucky people, rich people are involved in, and that's the system of compound interest. So I want to get every 25-year-old, no matter what's going on in their life, steadily saving for retirement through the Retirement Security Act for All Americans.
Thanks. And Alex, I don't know if you have any points that you think could move the needle that we're not doing. Is it engagement with the community, or are there other things that you think could be impactful?
Yeah, I just think, look, nothing that you haven't heard before. I just think knowledge is power. Read everything you can, learn as much as possible, surround yourself with the right people, and think small. When you think small, big things happen. Don't think you have to go out and hit a home run in the first at bat. You know, people in my office, if they don't have a capital, even our assistants invest $2,500, and the only way I let them do that is they have to come to the meetings, they have to listen, you have to develop your own talent, and you have to be able to bring people along. It's not fun to get rich by yourself, even though some people think it is. But there's nothing better to bring a clubhouse full of people, a locker room full of people, and help them, reach their goals.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I don't think that people should receive a massive delay in public benefits and should be rejected for a home loan because they don't have a traditional W-2 job. Right? So we're focused on meeting people where they are from a data perspective, utilizing all forms of deposit data, not just traditional banks, but digital wallets, payroll cards, prepaid cards, to enable individuals to be able to easily share their income and eliminate those barriers.
And I don't want to repeat what my colleagues have said, but employers, financial institutions have an opportunity to help people see themselves as investors, to help people with the tools that they need to have that sense of agency, of control over their future. And when I'm talking to investors, we always talk about a couple of things: keeping your emotions in check and taking a long-term view and diversifying. That's really the best thing that all of us can do when it comes to fostering financial stability, financial wellness, and moving the needle.
Thank you so much, and join me in thanking the panel for being with us today. Thank you.